She wasn't supposed to be there that morning. Just a shadow at the edge of the Arizona desert, sleeves rolled, hair tucked beneath her cap. The kind of soldier most people overlook until they need her. The heat was rising off the range, the scent of oil and dust thick enough to taste. But when the M249 machine gun jammed mid-drill and the recruits panicked, she moved first. Calm, precise, unhurried. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you still believe respect is earned, not given, make sure to like and subscribe, because this one reminds us why some names deserve to be remembered. They called her Corporal Lena Ward. They almost said it like punctuation, not respect. 28 years old, too quiet, too neat, too young to have the kind of calm that unnerved people who thought noise meant strength. Officially, she was maintenance support, an armorer, not a fighter. She fixed weapons others broke, cleaned barrels, checked triggers, logged numbers in notebooks no one read. She didn't bark orders or tell war stories over lunch. She just worked, steady hands and tired eyes. And on bases like Fort Sandmere, people who didn't talk much were easy to forget. She walked to the range before sunrise every morning. The desert air was cold then, still forgiving. Her boots made soft prints through the red dust as she unlocked the armory, a single key on a chain around her neck. Inside, she greeted rows of rifles and carbines like old friends, metallic reflections blinking back in the half-light. The smell of cleaning solvent was her perfume, the click of bolts, her music. No one joined her. No one asked why she preferred the quiet. Maybe they thought she was strange. Maybe they just didn't care. There was one thing she carried that no one noticed. A small, faded patch stitched beneath the rolled cuff of her sleeve. A silver phoenix, wings outstretched, barely visible against the olive fabric. It wasn't regulation. It wasn't supposed to exist at all. But she wore it anyway. Out of habit. Out of memory. Out of promise. The others liked to joke. Ward's a mechanic, not a Marine. She'd probably learned to shoot from YouTube. She never reacted, never corrected them. It was easier that way. Let them think she was harmless. The truth was quieter, heavier, buried beneath 7 years of silence and one mission she was never supposed to survive. Once, long before this desert, Lena had worn that phoenix on a different uniform. Operation Halberd, a name erased from public record, buried under layers of ink. A mission that took 6 soldiers into a valley no one came out of except her. The day she returned, command told her she'd been reassigned. Technical maintenance. Off combat duty. You've done enough, they said. But in the military, done enough always sounds a lot like, we don't want reminders. So she learned to disappear. That morning, the new recruits were testing fire synchronization. Fresh faces, loud voices, too much confidence. Sergeant Dugan barked orders while the unit practiced suppressive bursts. Everything was textbook until it wasn't. The M249 sputtered, coughed smoke, and locked. A jammed barrel mid-burst could be deadly. The recruits froze, waiting for the sergeant to fix it. Dugan swore, waved his hands, and shouted, "Where's the armorer?" Lena was already moving. She didn't rush, she didn't flinch. She knelt beside the weapon, fingers finding the latch by feel, loosening the retaining bolt while the smell of scorched steel rose around her. Someone muttered, "Careful, it's hot," but she was already cradling the weapon like it was something fragile. Her movements were quiet, economical, no hesitation, no wasted motion. From across the range, Colonel Harrington watched. He'd only been at Fort Sandmere for 3 weeks. Decorated, confident, one of those officers who carried his reputation like armor. To him, Lena was background staff, another name on a roster. Until that moment. He approached, clipboard under his arm, irritation cutting through the dry heat. "What's the delay?" he barked. No one answered. He frowned and stepped closer, just as she swapped the hot barrel for a fresh one, her glove brushing the dirt. The sleeve of her uniform slipped just enough for the sunlight to catch the hidden patch, the faint glint of silver wings. Harrington stopped mid-stride. The world seemed to narrow to that one small insignia. For a second, he wasn't a colonel on a training field. He was a younger man again, standing in a dim operations room years ago, reading after-action reports stamped Phoenix unit, classified. Reports about a mission that had gone dark. About a Corporal Ward who never came home. "Where did you get that patch?" he asked quietly. Lena didn't look up at first. She finished her inspection, wiped the feed tray with the corner of a rag, then rose to her feet. It was issued, sir, she said evenly. Long time ago. The recruits exchanged puzzled looks. Sergeant Dugan frowned, sensing a shift he didn't understand. Harrington stepped closer. Issued by who? She met his eyes finally, steady, calm, not defiant, just true. Phoenix Division. Operation Halberd. The air changed. Even the wind paused, as if listening. Harrington's voice fell to a whisper. You were Phoenix too? She nodded once. That was all. No pride, no explanation, just acknowledgement. Around them, the recruits froze. The same young man who'd laughed at her that morning now stood in stunned silence. Because Phoenix 2 wasn't a myth to the old guard, it was a ghost story. A rescue op that went dark in the Hindu Kush, an ambush no one was supposed to survive. And yet, one name had been rumored to appear in every after-action footnote. Ward, L. Status unconfirmed. Harrington straightened slowly, his clipboard forgotten in the dust. Carry on, Corporal, he said softly, but the authority was gone from his voice, replaced by something else. Respect. Maybe guilt. Maybe both. Lena gave a small nod, reassembled the M249, and handed it back to the stunned recruit. She's good now, she said quietly, then walked away without another word. The whispers started before she'd even reached the armory. Did you hear what she said? Halberd? I thought that was classified. No way she's that Ward. But the colonel didn't speak. He just watched her go, the sun glinting off the fate silver thread on her sleeve. A reminder that some legends never needed rank or ceremony. They just needed truth. That night, when the desert cooled and the base lights flickered against the dark, a message moved through the command network. Short, encrypted, almost reverent. Phoenix 2 located. Active duty, maintenance corps. Recommend commendation review. Lena didn't know it had been sent. She sat alone in the armory, polishing the same weapon she'd repaired that morning. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. She paused only once, to touch the hidden patch on her sleeve, fingers tracing the stitched wings like a quiet heartbeat. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Out on the range, the recruits would tell the story differently every time. About how the colonel froze, how the woman no one noticed turned out to be a ghost from a mission no one could forget. But they'd all agree on one thing. After that day, when Corporal Lena Ward walked by, every soldier stood a little straighter. The sun hadn't even reached its peak when the story began to spread through the base like wildfire. By lunchtime, it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was gospel. The quiet armorer, the one who never raised her voice and always smelled faintly of gun oil, had been Phoenix 2. Some said they overheard it directly from the colonel. Others swore they saw the insignia themselves. Either way, Fort Samir was buzzing. But Lena didn't seem to notice. She was back in the armory, sleeves rolled, head bent over the bench, cleaning a disassembled M4 as if nothing in the world had changed. Around her, the air felt charged, every metallic click echoing louder than usual. The younger soldiers who had once cracked jokes now hovered awkwardly near the door, pretending to need supplies they didn't. One of them, Collins, the one who'd mocked her that morning, lingered longest, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. You were in the Halberd op? He asked finally. Lena didn't look up. You shouldn't ask about that, she said simply. Her tone wasn't sharp, just final. But when she glanced at him, her eyes softened. Not everything worth knowing is in the reports. Private. He nodded quickly, embarrassed, and backed away. Outside, the range drills resumed, but the rhythm was off. Every pair of eyes seemed to glance toward the small concrete building where she worked. Even the instructors were quieter, their laughter replaced by low murmurs and long pauses. Colonel Harrington stood in his office, staring at an open file on his desk. The edges of the old paper had yellowed, but the photo at the center was unmistakable. 6 soldiers, fatigues blackened by soot, their faces carved with exhaustion. And there, half smiling in the middle, was Lena Ward, years younger, eyes sharper but already carrying that same stillness. Beneath the image, the caption read, Operation Halberd, Phoenix Unit. Status, declassified in part. Survivors, 1 confirmed. He'd read the report years ago. Everyone at command school had. It was a cautionary tale, an operation gone wrong in the Hindu Kush, a nighttime extraction that turned into a 72-hour ground defense. Radio contact lost. Enemy reinforcements tripled. The mission had been written off as irretrievable. But the classified addendum told a different story. A single transmission, static-filled, coming through 3 days later. Objective secured. Casualties, all mine. Signed Phoenix 2. Harrington swallowed hard and closed the file. When he stepped outside, the air felt heavier, the sky wider. He walked to the range, boots crunching over gravel. The recruits stiffened automatically, but he barely acknowledged them. His gaze went straight to Lena, still at her bench, adjusting the feed cover on the M249 she'd fixed earlier. "Corporal," he said quietly. She stood at attention, more out of habit than fear. "Sir." He hesitated, his voice lower than usual. "Do you still remember their names?" Her expression didn't change, but her fingers stilled on the weapon. "Every one of them." He nodded. There was nothing more to say. The silence between them was not awkward, it was full, heavy with shared understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. Later that afternoon, during final inspections, the air on base shifted again. Lena was walking back from the motor pool when a pair of senior NCOs passed her in the hall. They stopped mid-stride, eyes flicking to the faint outline of her patch beneath her rolled sleeve. The first instinct, to look away, faltered. Then, as if guided by something deeper than protocol, both men straightened and nodded once in quiet respect. She returned the gesture with a simple, "Afternoon, Sergeant," and kept walking. The acknowledgement rippled outward. Word reached the mess hall, the barracks, the administrative offices. People who had once overlooked her now noticed everything. The precision in her work, the calm in her voice, the discipline in her posture. She hadn't changed at all, but their sight had. That evening, while the base settled into its usual twilight routine, Lena returned to the firing range alone. The desert was quiet, the wind low. The M249 rested on the table in front of her, polished to a dull gleam. She loaded a single belt, fired a short, perfect burst, and then let the silence settle. She didn't notice Harrington watching from a distance, arms folded loosely. He wasn't inspecting this time. He was remembering. He approached slowly, hands behind his back. "We lost good people that day," he said quietly. She nodded once, eyes fixed on the horizon. "We didn't lose them, sir. We carried them home. Some of us just haven't stopped." Harrington exhaled through his nose, the sound almost like a sigh. "You know, they built an entire leadership course off that mission," he said. "They never mentioned names. Just the lesson. Hold the line until the mission breathes again." Lena gave a small, wry smile. "Sounds cleaner on paper." He chuckled softly, not from amusement, but from recognition. "You could have taken a desk years ago. Why stay here?" Her hands brushed dust off the machine gun. "Because these kids," she said, glancing toward the barracks, "need someone to show them that doing your duty isn't about noise or medals. It's about steadiness. You stand your post, no matter who's watching." The colonel studied her for a long moment, the kind of look reserved for ghosts and legends. "They should have promoted you long ago." "I don't need that," she said quietly. "Rank can't teach them what silence can." The desert wind picked up again, carrying the last rays of sunlight across the field. Harrington straightened his cap. "Still," he said, almost to himself, "I'll see what I can do." By nightfall, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Around the barracks, recruits whispered versions of it to each other. How the old colonel went pale when he saw her insignia. How the woman who fixed their rifles was a survivor from a mission even instructors didn't dare talk about. Some stories grow in the telling. This one didn't need to. The truth was heavy enough. When Lena returned to her quarters, she found a sealed envelope on her bunk. No sender, just a small, embossed insignia pressed into the paper. A phoenix, wings outstretched. Inside was a short note written in the clean, formal script of command. "For those who still stand watch, even when no one salutes." H. She read it once, then folded it neatly and tucked it into her journal. No smile, no tears, just quiet understanding. Outside, the base lights flickered under a starless sky. Somewhere in the dark, a distant generator hummed. And Corporal Lena Ward, once invisible, once forgotten, sat by the window polishing her tools. Not for recognition, not for nostalgia, but because someone had to keep the weapons ready. Tomorrow would come early, and the world, as always, would need steady hands. By morning, the base had changed. Not in the way paperwork could record or command memos could summarize, but in the way people looked at one another, especially her. The laughter that once echoed lightly through the armory was replaced by a quiet, measured respect. Soldiers spoke softer when she passed. Some even stood a little straighter without realizing why. Lena didn't want the attention. She moved through the day as she always had, checking weapons, logging inventory, calibrating sights. But something had shifted in the air. It followed her like the faint scent of gun oil and desert heat. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. At noon, Colonel Harrington called an unscheduled assembly. The recruits lined up, boots thudding into gravel, their chatter fading as they saw him standing at the podium with a single metal box in his hands. Lena arrived last, her sleeves rolled, gloves tucked into her belt. She tried to stand near the back, but the colonel's eyes found her instantly. "This isn't a briefing," he began, voice carrying across the open range. "It's a correction." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He paused, scanning the faces, some curious, some uneasy, before setting the box on the table beside him. "Yesterday, one of our own reminded us that rank and respect aren't the same thing. That service isn't about who talks loudest, but who keeps showing up when no one's watching." His tone softened. "Many of you know Corporal Ward as the technician who keeps your rifles clean and your weapons firing. But what most of you didn't know, what even I didn't realize, is that she once carried the call sign Phoenix too." Gasps stirred among the recruits. Lena's jaw tightened slightly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "She served in Operation Halberd," Harrington continued. "A mission we still study for its tactics, but never its names. The official reports said there were no survivors. They were wrong." He opened the box and withdrew a single medal, dulled by time but unmistakable, a silver star, engraved with a date nearly a decade old. "This," he said quietly, "was found archived under declassified status last night. It was never presented." The desert wind tugged at his uniform as he turned to her. Corporal Ward, front and center. Lena hesitated, eyes flicking toward the ground. For a moment she looked almost uncomfortable, a woman used to silence now being asked to stand in its center. But she stepped forward anyway, boots steady, shoulders squared. Harrington met her halfway, holding out the medal in his palm. "You don't need this to prove who you are," he said. "But it's long past due that someone said thank you." For a moment, the entire range was still. No rifles, no drills, no movement. Just the wind whispering through the flag above them. Lena took the medal quietly, fingers brushing the tarnished metal, and nodded once. "Permission to speak, sir?" she asked. "Granted." Her voice was low, but it carried with that same unshakable calm that had defined her since the beginning. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "And I didn't survive because I was better. I survived because someone had to remember them. Every day I fix these weapons, I think of that. Because readiness, respect, those things don't belong to medals or stories. They belong to the ones who still stand their post." No one spoke. No one moved. Harrington gave a small nod, eyes glinting in the sunlight. "Then keep standing, Corporal." Later that week, a small brass plaque appeared on the wall outside the armory, simple, unannounced, and signed. It read, "The Phoenix Bench, dedicated to Corporal Lena Ward. Proof that silence is not weakness, and valor needs no witness." Lena never mentioned it. She never attended the brief ceremony the officers held, never asked who ordered the engraving. But every recruit who came through Fort Sandmere learned the story, not from a speech, but from the quiet way she taught them to check every latch twice, to respect the weight of the weapons they carried, to clean without complaint and serve without needing applause. And years later, when those same recruits became leaders themselves, they carried a habit they couldn't explain. A small patch sewn inside their sleeves, hidden from view. A silver phoenix, wings spread wide. They never said why. They didn't have to. Because at Fort Sandmere, it became an unspoken rule, a legacy passed in silence. You don't need to be seen to matter. You just need to stand your post.